Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Megan Veck, and I will be moderating our discussion this evening. We are here together on the traditional and unceded territories of Squamish Nation. It is a privilege and a pleasure to live here, to play here, to work here, and tonight to debate here. So join me first and foremost in thanking our organizations that have hosted this conversation this evening. I'll give a shout out to the Downtown Squamish Business Improvement Association, the Squamish Chamber of Commerce, representing at the front here, Tourism Squamish, and the Squamish Chieh. So wonderful, thank you guys. I'd also like to thank our candidates. Thank you for being here with us this evening. This is an important election, important questions, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us tonight. So I will introduce our candidates, then I am going to give a run of show for the evening so each of you know what to expect. Then we're going to move into candidate introductions and our formal event will begin. So starting at the far end of the table there, we have Peyman Askari with the People's Party of Canada. Welcome. We have Lauren Greenlaw with the Green Party of Canada. We have Jager Rosenberg with the New Democratic Party. And Patrick Weiler with the Liberal Party. I'm going to try not to keep pivoting so the audio is consistent. I apologize if it's going really boom and bust here. So our run of show for this evening, we are going to start off with candidates' opening remarks. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. We will then move into panel questions. Our host organizations have supplied questions in advance, so we will give each of the candidates an opportunity in turn to answer those. We'll then move on to your questions. There are 2 opportunities or ways for you to submit your questions. The first is through Slido. There may be a slide up on the screen shortly for Slido, but if not, you can go to slido.com and you can enter the code 3882436. That will give you, as audience members, the opportunity to submit questions. It will also give you opportunities to upvote questions. So if we see that a question has a surge in popularity, we will be prioritizing it. If you're not comfortable with Slido, you can also go to the side of the room here or to Carrie at the front table here and write your question on a cue card. It will then be put into Slido on your behalf. So I encourage you to make use of both those options. Wonderful. Some housekeeping. If you have the opportunity to put your phone on vibrate, please do. Washrooms, if you need them, are just out the door to the left and to the left down that hallway. They're immediately on your right-hand side there. Wonderful. Looks like people are trickling in shortly. Let's get started, shall we? So again, we are going to move to candidates' opening remarks. We are going to start on my right-hand side with the People's Party of Canada. You have 3 minutes. There's also a timer up on the table there that will show you how much time you have remaining. Go ahead.
Testing. Hello, thank you very much. Thank you to the host. Thank you to everyone that's here in attendance today. My name is Peyman Askari. I am running for the People's Party of Canada. I never considered myself running for office, and I see myself as a citizen politician of sorts, a citizen candidate. My journey started in December of 2020. I started noticing things that were a little bit alarming with the trajectory of this country that I had been a part of for the last 35 years. I first started volunteering for the National Citizens Inquiry, and as the lead volunteer, I was tasked with answering all the phone calls from concerned citizens from all over the country, and something remarkable happened. I would talk to an 80-year-old farmer in the middle of Ontario who understood tax law. I would talk to a stay-at-home mother who went to law school with Bruce Party who understood everything about constitutional law. And I thought to myself, well, why would I pay a consultant to tell me these things when I can talk to regular Canadians and understand what's going on in our country? Since then, I've created a podcast. As of today, I've talked to 188 Canadians, and all of us are united in the same cause of trying to understand where is this country going, where are we strong, where could we be stronger. And the things that I'm concerned with and that I'm running is things like the liberties that I had growing up, the freedom that I had, that I see that the youth now don't have. I'm talking about the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the housing situation, not just that the housing is expensive, but it's that the youth will never own a house, and what implications that's going to have on society when you have disgruntled youth like that. I'm also, I've become increasingly, I'm no longer the fun-loving person I was in 2020. I'm very much interested in tax law and very much interested in the economy. So I'm very opposed to the commercial banking system, the financialization of our economy, the wiping out of our industry, and given the tariff wars, hopefully we can kind of align that with the People's Party to see if there's some way that we can onshore industry. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, Lauren Greenlaw.
Hi, I'm Lauren. You may recognize me. I'm a counselor with the District of Squamish. I am an earth scientist. I'm also a mother. And I originally got into politics because I felt really overwhelmed at the lack of action that's been happening. And I felt very strongly that environmentally, our government is not protecting us. And I was frankly deeply concerned for the state of the world for my children. And my neighbor asked me if I wanted to run for municipal politics, and so I did, and I got elected, and then I got in there, and I realized that basically so many responsibilities are being downloaded onto municipalities that we end up dealing with issues that we do not have the levers or funding to actually do anything about, like homeless issues, mental illness issues, addiction issues, housing issues. All of these pieces that are meant to be covered by our federal and provincial governments are being actively or inactively, I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but downloaded onto municipalities. And I got really frustrated when I saw people who were very deeply impacted and very upset who I could not help. And so the Green Party asked me if I wanted to run for them, and I said, sure, again, because I'm a glutton for punishment. And so anyway, so what I'm here to talk about, I'm here to start conversations about systemic change. I believe that the problems that we see in our society are all interconnected. I like to say on the municipal level that all issues are interconnected to an infuriating degree. And they all come down to wealth disparity globally is the biggest issue that humanity is facing, and that is based upon social inequity, including gender inequity and racial inequity, but it is also the root of all of our environmental issues, all of our social issues. They're all interconnected. So in that way, you know, there's only a few things we need to change. But yeah, so right now I'm living in Squamish, and I can sit in this chair because I have secure housing, because I have a supportive partner, because I have a supportive community. I can stand here and advocate for my people. But the way that I am experiencing the affordability crisis is I am losing my community. My friends are being pushed out of this town. My friends are, I had a friend last year with a daughter who was homeless for 6 months. And part of that is an accessibility issue. But I think a really big part of our problems right now are, frankly, our government is subsidizing fossil fuel industry, and it is not serving anyone. We need that money back for our people. We need to be able to put this money back into the pockets of Canadians, but more importantly, we need support for our health care, our mental health, and our housing. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Perfect use of the 3 minutes. Love that. With the NDP, Jager Rosenfeld.
Hello. Hello. My name is Jager Rosenberg. I was born in this riding. I grew up here. This is my home. But things are not going well here. Housing is becoming more and more unaffordable. Housing prices are going up. And I know this isn't something a politician would normally say, but I don't want to be up here. I don't want to be the one running for office. But as I've been following politics for years, no one is going to step in and save us. So after I had a good conversation with Avi Lewis last year, he convinced me to run provincially. And it was a great campaign. It wasn't quite enough to get in, but I saw people struggling, I've been struggling, through COVID. People have been struggling since COVID, and people can't afford food. They can't afford rent. And I saw that excitement of having a young voice in, having someone who understands what normal people are going through. So I got talked into running again federally. I'm glad I did because, I hear a lot of good things from the other candidate, but I still don't hear that understanding of what people are going through. The Liberal Party has said a lot of good things for a lot of years. It's been 10 years since Justin Trudeau first won. But what has happened in that time? Housing prices have skyrocketed. The climate crisis has continued to get worse. Things are more and more unaffordable every day. And we keep hearing like things are gonna get fixed, keep hearing all these solutions they're gonna come up with. But it's been 10 years. And with Mark Carney, the first thing he did was cut taxes for the wealthy. The NDP, even with only 25 MPs, we've managed to get dental care through, pharmacare through, anti-scab legislation through. And then the Liberals try and take credit for all those accomplishments when they had 4 years of majority government to get that through. And then here you can see that the Conservative candidate hasn't even shown up to this debate. They say that they're the alternative to the Trudeau government. How are they going to show up for you when they can't even show up to a debate? We're seeing more and more the need to strengthen our democracy and not weaken it. In America, they are stuck in a two-party system where they're slowly breaking down the corporate rules, where it's corporations and billionaires who own the government and not the people. Now is not the time to vote for the lesser of two evils, to cause a two-party system. Because once you're in a two-party system, you can't get out. And they will break down the rules, they will fight for billionaires and fight workers. They will do what they've done where they break up strikes for workers and they continue to enrich those at the top. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick Weiler, over to you.
Thank you very much, Megan, and I do want to thank all my fellow candidates for being here tonight, but especially everybody for coming to be here tonight. It's incredible to see the turnout and how so many folks are interested in our democracy at a really critical time right now. For those that don't know me, my name is Patrick Weiler. I've been your member of parliament for the last 5.5 years. I'm someone that's born and raised in this riding. It's my home. It's where my friends, my family live. It's not a vacation home for me. And it's been the real honor of my lifetime to be able to serve you over this time and to work with some incredible leaders. And I see a number of them in the audience here, whether that's, mayor and council, whether that's folks that are working on tackling the housing crisis here in Squamish and serving some of our most vulnerable members of our community. And I really believe that there's so much more that we can do when we work together. And what that's looked like in Squamish since I was elected is some major federal investments in Squamish, whether that's 416 below market housing units that have been built here, whether that's major infrastructure investments like $17.5 million into Brennan Park, investments into our wastewater infrastructure here to enable more housing, investments into raising the dike here to protect us against some of the major risks of extreme weather that unfortunately we're seeing more and more of. And whether that's building partnerships with some of our hosts that are here tonight to expand our economy locally so that we can be able to bring people to the amazing place that we live in here and access the great outdoors, but be able to do that in a way that contributes to our local economy and the workers here. But looking ahead here, we're at a really critical time in our country and the world. There's so much uncertainty that we see And for the first time in our lifetimes, our sovereignty is under threat. With US President Trump being elected, he's coming after our land, our water, our resources, and threatening our identity and our sovereignty. So this is a gut check time for Canada and the world, but what we're going to do and whether we're ready to stand up. And that's why I was an early supporter of Mark Carney, because he's someone that has all of the experience navigating Canada and other countries through some major crises, and he has a plan to fight the unjustified tariffs that are coming forward, to be able to protect workers, as well as to build the strongest economy by doing things like tackling trade barriers that we have in between our provinces and accessing new markets for businesses that are going to be affected. It's a very different vision that's been put on display by the Conservative Party. Unfortunately, the Conservative member isn't here today to speak to it, but that is very much things that will isolate Canada from the world by getting us out of things like the United Nations and by attacking our cultural institutions like the CBC. It's not the time for that, and if you like me, I'll stand up for you.
Well, thank you to each of our candidates for your introduction. If you are standing in the back and would like to grab a seat, this is a great time to do it. There are some open spots just on the far side there. Our host organizations have supplied some questions for us, so we are going to jump into those, and then we will be moving over to your questions through Slido and written ones. So our first question is from the Downtown BIA, and this question will be addressed to all four candidates, my mistake. The Sea to Sky corridor, and particularly downtown Squamish, is an essential hub for local business and tourism. What specific actions would you take at a federal level to support the growth and sustainability of small businesses in our region, particularly in light of challenges like rising costs and infrastructure needs? So we're going to reverse our order this time. So Patrick Weiler, I'll invite you to start.
Okay, well, thanks so much for the question. I think, I've seen a lot of and heard of a lot of the challenges that small businesses are facing, particularly things like challenge in finding workers connected to our housing crisis that we have here, rising lease costs that is making it very difficult to, to maintain businesses in our downtown core. One of the main things that I've been focused on is working very closely with the district and the nonprofit housing societies to get more affordable housing built here. Just earlier today, I was speaking to people in the Sea and Sky development where a new below-market affordable rental complex has been built. I think that's part of it. There's a lot more that we need to do for workforce housing at Squamish. And I think part of it as well is, as our community is growing so quickly, we need the supporting infrastructure for that. One of the things that I've been working very closely with the provincial government on, and all of the mayors in the Sea to Sky region, is getting regional transit in our area here. Since we lost Greyhound in 2018, we haven't had that access. We have a very integrated region that we live in here. We need to restore that. And just about a month ago, I made a major investment, or made a major announcement of an investment in BC Transit that will provide that long-term certainty of funding going to the communities that we live in here. Beyond that, there will be businesses that will be impacted by the tariffs, and I want to make sure that I'm going to be there on an ongoing basis to support them as we go through this.
Wonderful, thank you.
One of the biggest enemies to small business is large corporations. They actively try and break up small local businesses so they can take their share of the profit. One of the most important things to protect local businesses is to keep a check on big corporations like Amazon, Apple, Loblaws, so that we can continue to have a more free market where it also keeps things more affordable when more people own the companies. Another thing we can do is also, as Patrick said, get rents lower so businesses don't go broke just paying the rent. And by increasing wages and having more affordable housing, it allows people to have more spare income so they can start a business. The NDP recently announced a government-backed low-interest mortgage for first-time homebuyers. That will also allow those first-time homebuyers to have more opportunities to buy a business, start a business, and keep their family businesses going. It's one of those issues that is so interconnected with so many other things. And one of the most important ways to solve it is to talk to people. We need to have there's often a disconnect between Ottawa and what's on the ground. We need to be directly talking to municipal government, provincial government, and people on the ground with citizens' assembly where they can tell us, how is your business? What support can we give you, rather than just having a top-down approach? It needs to be bottom-up.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, one of the pieces, I think, to addressing the environmental and political instability that we are seeing, for instance, all of the volatility south of the border and threats of tariffs, is to really build a resilient local economy. So I think it's very important that we prioritize incentivizing small businesses and decreasing their overhead costs, be that through introducing more affordable housing, which is a key component in this municipality. It is also a key component for all of our workers, because so many people, so many businesses in our community, they can't staff their businesses because nobody can find housing. And I know we have people in town who I've been working with as well, who are trying to facilitate affordable housing. And this is an incredibly important initiative, and we need to drive it further down. The Green Party is introducing some tax restructuring in terms of increasing corporate taxation. Again, and also increasing the non-taxable portion of your annual income. So right now it's at about $15,000 a year, and that amount has not changed in decades, and increasing that to $40,000 a year of non-taxable income. So anybody making less than $100,000 a year would be keeping basically an extra $300 a month in their pocket. And I want to just say the $189 million for transit is just meant to maintain the fleets. That is not anywhere near what we need. But anyways.
Peyman, over to you.
If you want to help small businesses, get rid of the capital gains tax, lower the corporate tax for small businesses, get on a plane, go down to the US and try to negotiate with Trump as much as possible. I mean, the man is an impossible man, but try to lower the tariffs. And finally, let's figure out a way to renegotiate USMCA so that we can be a little bit more protectionist and keep some of these, massive tech companies out. And that's my answer. Thank you.
Our next question here is from Tourism Squamish. Tourism infrastructure and development is critical for our destination's current and future opportunities to ensure a sustainable, desirable place to visit. What is your party's position on establishing a tax credit program to incentivize investment in new tourism assets and the upgrading of existing infrastructure? Lauren Greenlaw, I'm going to start off with you this time.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was going to be Jager, but okay. Yeah, well, again, I mean, it takes communication with these industries. I think if that's what the tourism industry thinks will be most beneficial to our community, then I think that's something that we should advocate for. I do feel like in Squamish in particular, one of our issues is that we do not have enough hotel rooms, and not to beat a dead horse here, but over a quarter of our hotel rooms are currently being held by basically an LNG project that's happening in our town. And if that project were not subsidized by our federal and provincial governments, then we would not have that problem, and we may potentially have a much healthier tourism ecosystem, because tourism, to my knowledge, is actually our primary industry, and that needs to be bolstered as much as possible. We need to have a transition from fossil fuel industry, and we need to have resilient tourism in our community. The other piece is, I was at the POW meeting the other night talking about all of the economic impacts, particularly around outdoor recreation regions, of climate change. And the impacts are devastating. It's not just losing trails, but it's also the health impacts that climate change is having. So I think, like I said, everything is interconnected, but we need to start addressing some of these key pieces. And part of that is, again, defunding fossil fuel companies and bringing that money back into real industries that are bringing jobs to our community. Thanks.
So the order this time is going to be 3, 4, 2, 1. So I'm going to go Peyman, Askari. Would you like to answer?
Sure. The People's Party, we're kind of a limited government party. So the federal government, what are the core responsibilities it has? First and foremost, it's got to man the courts to adjudicate disputes that cannot be outsourced to the private sector. Secondly, it's got to provide for defense, the military, man the borders. and also a law enforcement body, the RCMP. I mean, if we delegate the responsibility of tourism to the federal government, what's going to happen is you're centralizing power, and people are going to be vying for that power. I would rather just cut corporate taxes, sorry, not corporate, but small businesses. So corporate taxes for small businesses, just cut it across the board. The government doesn't give you anything that it hasn't already taken away from you. Let's just have faith in the people and let them grow their own business. Thank you.
Jager Rosenberg, I'm going to put the mic on you next.
Well, this question really ties into the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, the small businesses, especially tourism businesses, were completely decimated from the pandemic, and the government hasn't provided adequate support to get them back up and running. I live in Gibsons, you know, Lower Gibsons, it's pretty much all tourist based. We don't have the ability to go years without having any people coming into the town. And it's wiped out livelihoods. People have been forced to move off the coast. They've been forced out of their jobs. And it's hard enough to live on an income year round, let alone when you're already only living based off of summer income. And now the tariffs are making it even worse by making things more expensive and scaring off tourism, really. People don't want to travel when they're, you know, not sure what's going to happen next. So the first step to this is to get the tariff situation under control. Stand up to Trump. You know, negotiating with him will not work. He does not care about any of the things he's pretending to. He's only doing this because he likes the attention. So we need to just stand up to him, say flat out, we will not accept your tariffs. We will fight you every step of the way. And then we need to give good tax, we need to lower taxes for small businesses that are providing good services to the community. And we need to provide low interest loans when companies need it so that they're not getting, you know, gouged by big banks when they're trying to survive.
Thank you.
So I'd say it's a really interesting idea to look at tax incentives for the tourism sector. To Lauren's point, I think one of the big areas we need some investment in Squamish is new hotels. Not just with the current project that's being built with wood fiber, which there is no federal subsidies going to, but generally we need more hotels in the region here. I would say the other part, when we're talking about infrastructure, we need to make it easier for people to get around and get here. I mentioned earlier the need for regional transit. That would be a game changer. It's not only causing congestion on our roads, but you know, other than you know, a number of private operators for transit, we need to be able to get around a lot easier here. The federal government has been there for the tourism sector. We provided not only things like the wage subsidy, no interest loans, and rent subsidies, we actually provide additional subsidies for the tourism sector coming out of it, including things like the Tourism Relief Fund that was investing in different really critical infrastructure in our region, like providing some no interest loans to the Sea to Sky gondola, without which the Sea to Sky gondola would have gone under after the second time that the cable was cut. So I think there's a lot more that we can do to support that, whether that's things like SORCA, the Wind Sports Society, federal government supported getting a new boat so they could get to the end of the spit, which is important. But I think tax incentives or grants is one of the ways of getting there.
Thank you. This next question is from the Squamish Chamber, again addressed to all candidates. Affordable housing is a factor in the long-term success of businesses in Squamish. Businesses need people, and people need a place to live. Rents in Squamish have grown over 50% in the last 5 years, and our rental vacancy rates are among the lowest in British Columbia. This is having serious impacts on our community's resilience and local workforce. What would you and your party do to address rental affordability and availability in Squamish? And Jager Rosenberg, I'm going to go to you first this time.
Well, housing affordability is one of the most important issues for people across the country. I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford a home. That's the simple reality for my generation. It's a dream that's considered gone for most people. But politicians, they don't generally understand, they don't understand that. An MP makes $190,000 a year as a base salary. Most politicians are landlords. A huge number are landlords. They're not gonna, it doesn't affect them. Around elections, they'll make a bunch of promises to lower housing costs, but they're not gonna actually do it because it doesn't affect them. The best way to get a politician to actually fix an issue is have it personally affect them, and it personally affects me. I recently was living in Germany because it was more affordable to go to school on another continent than it was to go here in British Columbia. That is not acceptable. We need to lower housing costs. We need to get big landlords out of the political atmosphere because they are controlling the Conservative Party. The Conservative candidate here, he's made lots of money off of the housing crisis. And we need to get people's voices heard. We need to build more houses. We need to make loans for mortgages more affordable so you can get that security. And we need to have more options for types of housing. We need co-ops. We need, big buildings. We need small houses. Everything we can have.
Wonderful. Patrick Weiler.
So just earlier today, I did an announcement with Prime Minister Carney about our plan to support getting more housing built across the country. He's proposed a plan, we're proposing a plan that will double the housing construction to 500,000 units per year, which will help meet the demand that we have across the country. And how we're going to do that, it's going to be working closely with municipalities through things like the Housing Accelerator Fund that's already making a difference in Squamish. It's by bringing back things like the MERB tax credit, which is helping get a lot more multi-unit residential buildings built. It's things like improving the productivity of our housing sector by doing more prefabricated homes. Companies like Tag Panels, Nexia had a good concept as well, and that could increase, can actually build houses about twice as fast as traditional methods. It's things like bringing back the housing design catalog after World War II, where we got so many of the houses built then. We need to bring those back to make it easier to build by providing infrastructure funding for communities, allowing municipalities to drop development cost charges to make housing more affordable. But really to get to the point of affordable rental, we have this program called the Apartment Construction Loan Program. I mentioned earlier, it helped to finance the Sea to Sky project. What that does is it allows developers to access the government's rate of borrowing if they can build below market units. And we can do a lot more of this, and the funding's already there.
Thank you. Peyman, over to you.
Provincially, this causes problems, but I have to agree with the provincial government in the rent hike freeze they've put on. Property is a special class of a commodity that people needed to live, and if people can't find enough housing, you're going to get civil strife. So that's a good start. The other thing is, to relieve pressure from the housing market, we do have to reduce immigration, and even the Liberal Party has admitted to this, and Michael Clark, who ran for the leadership position, said we need to have a moratorium on immigration. That will also help. Finally, if you want to solve the housing crisis, you have to address the root cause, which is speculation. I get a loan from the bank, I buy a house for $1 million, I sell it to somebody for 1.1 million, he sells it back to me for 1.2. Back and forth we go. The bank is getting its cut, and the government is involved in this fraudulent activity because they're vouching for the bank. That's the only way that we're going to get out of this situation. The problem isn't that we don't have enough housing. The problem is that the value of that housing is astronomical. Like $1 million for a house. How can anybody live in there? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so, the affordability conversation is a really difficult one because it's rooted in the hyper-commodification of land. And we've basically tied people's retirements to home ownership. And it's a very difficult piece to unravel. But what we need to have is more control and transparency over international foreign investment. And also, if you haven't heard of real estate investment trades, it's basically a way of hyper-commodification commodifying housing on an international basis. We need more regulations around it. Right now, it's really running rampant. It's driving up all of our local prices. We need more investment, a lot more investment in affordable housing of different modalities. We need to have rental housing. We need to have home ownership models. So all of those pieces need to be invested in. And another piece about accessibility in this town specifically is, once again, we've had a lot of difficulty getting clarity on how much Fortis and Woodfibre are actually taking up our rental stock. Prior to them coming in, we had about 0.6% vacancy, which a healthy market is about 3 to 5% vacancy. Prior to them coming in, we had about 0.6%, and now it's around 0. So it's really, again, if we didn't subsidize oil and gas companies, that would alleviate that piece there. And perhaps it isn't federal subsidies to Woodfibre, but certainly the day that the Liberals announced $189 million to transit, they announced $200 million to an LNG export facility in northern BC. So the problem still very much exists in another neighborhood.
This next question is from the Squamish Chief. Outside of issues with the United States, tariffs, the 51st state, what do you see as being a main concern for Squamish voters specifically, and how would your party address that concern? Patrick Weiler, we'll go to you first.
I hate to sound like a broken record here, but I think it is housing. And we just talked about the need to build more housing in Squamish and to make more affordable housing happen here. I think it's working closely with the district, working with the Squamish Community Housing Society to get the below market units built, get the units built across the spectrum. But for a community also that's growing as fast as Squamish is, it's making sure that we have the supporting infrastructure to allow that. So it's everything from like water, wastewater, things like that, to the recreational infrastructure. It's not just things like Brennan Park, which absolutely need to expand, and the federal government needs to be a partner in that. It's certainly the transportation infrastructure to support more density that's being brought in. And it's also the social infrastructure. You know, one of the key things that the federal government invested in 2021 is bringing in $10 a day childcare. You know, there's about 600 spaces that have been built in the riding, and we need so many more. And frankly, we need the province to step up, because now the federal government's providing more money for health or for childcare in BC than the provincial government. So I think these are some of the challenges that a fast-growing community has, and you need senior orders of government to be there to support it. And I think that's probably the biggest challenges that we have in Squamish. And you know, as your MP, I'll be advocating for those kind of investments here.
Thank you. Lauren Greenlaw, I'm going to go to you second.
So we need to build resilience in our communities. Right now, Trump's entire tactic is chaos. And what chaos does is it puts people in a reactionary state, and we need to be able to be responsive. So in order to build resilience in our communities, we need to have that affordability piece. We need to have safe housing. We need to have access to food. Again, like so many of these pieces come back to the same conversation. We need to have a resilient local economy. So we need to really facilitate getting farm to market and local products to market as well. We need to eliminate the barriers that companies and small producers are facing, and we need to start having that resilience within our riding in order to protect us from, well, lunacy. So, yeah, I think that's the main way to protect our community, is to really be community-centric and community-focused and focus on building that resilience. And to me, what that means is, one of the things we're working on is creating a giant web of businesses and producers in the entire riding, so that we can facilitate people out there trying to support local. I've been trying to buy local for a long time now, and often it's very difficult to find local resources. So just trying to basically amplify the voices of small businesses. Again, I really believe the small businesses are a key component to building our resilience in our riding. Thanks.
Peyman Askari, if you'd like to take the mic next.
Yes, I believe the question was, what's the main threat to Squamish? Again, broken record here, I would say it's the economy. Everything else when you have a broken economy, everything else falls out from that. So we discussed the housing situation. Ever since Trudeau came in 2015, we've been devaluing our currency. to help increase exports to the detriment of the Canadian citizen, because now everything that we import is going to be more expensive. That's another example of how the economy impacts the lives of everyday people. You know, I'm not talking about corporations, I'm not talking about conglomerates, anything like that, just ordinary people. Fix our economy. That's my response. Thank you.
Well, I'd agree it's also housing is the biggest issue across the country. But it also ties into other issues, you know? Housing is tied to the environment because, you know, more climate disasters we get, the more houses are destroyed, the more you need to buy them, the more you need to pay for insurance, which adds to the affordability issue more broadly. The more you need to pay for insurance, the less you can afford food. You know, it all kind of ties together, and there's so many important issues. One of the issues that gets talked about less is mental health. That's really the issue that got me involved in politics. Was across the province, but especially here, we don't have enough mental health resources. You know, every single person in this room, I guarantee, has either personally struggled with mental health or has someone close to them who has struggled with it. And we don't recognize that. You know, there isn't funding towards that. You know, at best, we're treating the symptoms and not the root causes of the problem. So I think we need more investments in mental health facilities. We need more investments in housing. We need to stop subsidizing fossil fuel companies. And we need to really talk to people and listen to what their concerns are. That's the biggest issue, is our lack of democracy in Canada. Our system is outdated. It doesn't work for people. As long as we have a first past the post electoral system, we're never gonna really be able to have a true democracy, because people are always voting out of fear instead of voting for what they want. And if you're voting out of fear, you're not gonna get a good result.
Well, thank you. That concludes our organization submitted questions. We are going to switch over to Slido now. So I'm going to start with the question that received the most upvotes. Will we ever see our election system switch to proportional representation? Starting with the juicy one. All right. Peyman, Askari, I'm going to hand this one over to you first.
So Justin Trudeau, if you remember, in 2015, he got elected on this promise. But what happens is when you get in and you realize that something won't be to your advantage, you're not going to pursue that policy. So how do we get a proportional representation, or like the US primary form of government? I mean, you're not going to get it by not splitting the vote. If you keep ping-ponging between the two political parties, they will do whatever is in their best interest. So I agree with my panelists here. We need to consider the importance of democracy, where democracy is the will of the people, and just keep chugging along and fighting. And this may sound corny, but town halls like this do make a difference. People coming together and discussing these issues. So that would be my advice for how to get first past the post repealed and get more proportional representation. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we have 53 questions and counting here in Slido. So I'm not going to ask each candidate to respond to every question, but is there another candidate that would like to respond to that one? Lauren, great. Let's go, Lauren, and then Jager.
It's like a table full of talkers, so it's going to be a hard sell. But yeah, I mean, I think to Peyman's point, town halls like this matter, but they only matter if your government's actually listening to you. And in 2017, there was a national survey that showed that 67% of Canadians did not trust their government. And I don't know if you've noticed, if you've done a temperature check since then, but I don't think that's gotten better. It's gotten far, far worse. And when I'm in council chambers, I hear that we exist by the grace of the province. And I always like to remind them that we actually exist by the grace of the people. And your voices do matter, but we need more engagement in democracy, because it's very clear that the primary parties in power will not change a system that is benefiting them, and they have made that abundantly clear. They are acting out of corporate and self-interest. It's like there was this really great, I mean, this is American, but John Oliver did an interview with a senator, and he said, like, so what's your primary objective as senator? And he said, to get reelected. And he said, well, and to represent the people, right? And he was like, oh, yeah, to represent the people. And it was just like, Exactly. A lot of these people, they find it's actually $210,000 a year now, $207,460 or something. They find these roles, they get, what do they call them, gold-plated pensions, and they roll with it. And they need to get out of the way to let new voices come into government, to have that change and to have that refresh.
I mean, you can just look at the results from 2015. Justin Trudeau, he campaigned as a left-winger. He basically copied the NDP and pretended he was more left-wing than us, the campaign, to switch over voters. And then once he got in power, nope, I'm not gonna do electoral reform. You know, it's too divisive because people don't wanna do my system. He wanted ranked ballot because that would help his party the most, but the public wanted proportional representation, so he just threw the whole thing out. I think that we should have a citizens' assembly and let people decide what system they want to use. You know, there's a direct link in countries between how proportional their system is and how well their government serves them. The reason why our housing prices are so high in Canada, the reason why our environment, our climate change targets are so low is because the Liberal Party just needs to convince you they're left-wing enough to not vote Conservatives during an election, and then once they get their majority, they completely ditch everything they promised. The best years of Justin Trudeau's government has been the last 5 years because he's been in a minority, when he hasn't had unchecked power, when he's been forced to work with other parties to work for Canadians instead of just working towards re-election. It's gotten good results. And not only do we need to change how we vote, we also need to let more people vote. The voting age should be lowered. Young people are ready and capable to take part in our democracy. They should be given the vote, and we need to increase civics education because they don't want people to know how our system works because it makes it easier for them to scare people into voting for them.
A quick follow-up question on that. What voting age would you recommend?
Political parties in Canada allow anyone 14 and up to vote as full voting members. If you were 14, you could vote for Mark Carney to become Prime Minister, but now you can't vote for who your member of Parliament is. The NDP, we let anyone 12 and up. So I think if political parties let anyone 14 and up vote, why can't we let normal, non-members 14 and up vote?
All
And
right.
the Green Party is advocating for 16.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last rebuttals? And Patrick, do you want to respond to a rebuttal there?
Maybe just very quickly, I actually agree that we should have a citizens' assembly on electoral reform. There was an NDP bill last year, or motion, to create one, and I think that's the only way you can do electoral reform, because every party will have their own system that will benefit them, whether it's ranked ballot or whether it's proportional representation. It should never be in the hands of politicians to figure out what the system should be, because they're obviously biased. So, the system that we had in BC made the most sense when we did that, more than 20 years ago. Select a representative sample of citizens to learn about all the different systems, and then put whatever system that they find works the best to a referendum. Don't do it like we did in BC, where you needed 60%, do it 50% plus one, and then I think we'd see some major important changes in our democracy. So I think that's the way to do it. It's something that I've supported in the past, as well as a bill that would, or a motion that would have sent an investigation to committee to look at lowering the voting age to 16. I think of some of the young people that are on my constituency youth council. The amount of interest and engagement that they have in politics is really inspiring to me. And I think the more that we can get young people involved in politics, the better. Certainly we need more civics education, but we want to find more ways of bringing people in. I mean, there still is a lot of ways for young people to get involved in politics even before they can vote. I know so many of the greatest folks that worked in my campaign weren't able to vote, but the more we can do, the better.
So I'm going to start selecting 2 candidates per question, and then the floor will be open for rebuttal. We have about 55 questions, so that'll just give us the opportunity to cover more topics. Next question I'm looking at here is from Justin Partridge. How would you handle a situation where the views of this riding differ from your party's views? How can we be sure our views will be represented? Jager, Rosenberg, why don't we go to you first?
Okay, I guess with the last thing, my party's position is to lower the voting age to 16. I'm a little bit more extreme than my party on that issue. So, but I mean, we need to do more to protect our forests, I think. We need to really, we live in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. We need to keep logging jobs, which are good paying union jobs, and protect those, but we also need to do it in a very sustainable way. My grandpa was a logger, that's how my family made their money and survived. So we can't put people's livelihoods at risk, but we also need to keep our environment safe. We shouldn't be cutting down old growth. We have lots of newer trees we can cut down. And we need to really do more about the environment. That was the issue that really first got me thinking about politics, was the environment. Why are we funding fossil fuel companies when they're making billions of dollars of profit? Why are environmentalist parties, backing away from all these policies that other countries have done and that work? I think we really, really need to have deeper conversations about the environment, and it needs to become a top issue again, because I understand why the tariffs and housing have become, so front and center. They should be. But we also need to talk about the environment, because that ties into everything else.
Yeah.
All right, so I think the second candidate that I'm going to give it to is Patrick Weiler as the incumbent, but I want to open up the floor to a rebuttal first before we go over to you, Patrick.
Well, I think what's really important to remember is, who you elect as your representative isn't accountable to their party, they're accountable to you. And I think I've shown in the past that I'm not willing to take a stand on things that really matter for our community, even if it doesn't. It's not the position of my party. We were talking about electoral reform earlier. I voted against the party line on that. Lowering the voting age to 16, I voted against my party line on that. We do have some rules about what votes are whips in my party, but they're only votes that are confidence votes, which are usually spending measures, and things that are in our campaign platform, because that's a promise that I'm making to you by running on it when I'm campaigning. So you've also seen when I haven't agreed with our foreign policy with respect to the Israel-Gaza conflict, and I'm not afraid to take a stand on that when it's a matter of principle and when it's something that's important to our riding, and so that's what I'll continue to do here, and I think that's what's really important, because I am your voice in Ottawa, not the other way around. And I think some politicians are not necessarily comfortable putting their neck out there, but at the end of the day, you have to remember who you're accountable to, and for me, number one is you.
So I just wanted to point out, even if, the Green Party is not whippable, which is really nice, we actually run on a philosophy as opposed to party platforms. But even if Patrick is willing to step out of line with his party, regardless of whether or not you stood against your party, still, if we elect a majority of Liberals, then we end up with a majority government, in which case it's just kind of free reign for the Liberals. So just a thought. They don't have to actually consult with other parties. It's preferable to have a minority government for the Liberals. That made sense? Everybody's looking at me quizzically. Never mind, go ahead.
All right. We are going to move on to our next question. Although not top of mind issue in this campaign, climate change is still a real and existential threat. What will your party do to try to address climate change? I think 3 of the party platforms are pretty well known. Peyman, Askari, I don't know the People's Party position on this one as well, so I would love to give this question to you, and then we'll open it up to a rebuttal.
Yeah, I guess that's a tough one for us. Again, we love the environment and we believe in environmentalism. Keep the streams clean. Don't pollute. But we don't believe in destroying the economy. I keep going back to that just because of this notion of climate change. So now you've forced my hand, and I'm going to go there. I was never a big fan of Stephen Harper, but what Harper did was he found something that we had, and he figured out that he would export that to prop up our dollar. That something was oil, and that kept our dollar strong. When the power was transferred in 2015 to the Liberals, the decision was made to stop doing that and instead invest in industries that were not very productive. And the way you do that is by giving subsidies. So we went from selling something that the world wanted to taking loans out from commercial banks at interest to subsidize businesses that weren't producing money, and that's what we're against. I can't stress this enough. We love the environment. All Canadians love the environment. We want a clean environment, but we have to do this in a reasonable manner because we're destroying the future for the youth. Thank you.
I think Lauren wants a rebuttal.
Hi, I'm an earth scientist. Yeah, well, I'd like to point out it's something that we are learning right now is that we are exceeding the bounds of our planet, and that is clear. That's why everything is collapsing. And I will point out that you cannot have a healthy economy without a healthy environment. That is backwards. All of our wealth, all of our assets come from and ultimately return to the earth. So that's an important distinction because most economists see environment as an externality, and it is not. It is a foundational piece of our economy. And another piece, what Harper did was change all of our water protections, so no longer were tributaries for rivers protected, just the river itself. So you could contaminate all the tributaries, and then guess what happens? You contaminate all the waterways. So I do not like seeing Harper and environment anywhere near in the same sentence, but I think we do need to have a paradigm shift in our mentality where we realize that Earth is, our environment is our biggest asset, our biggest resource, and our bottom line, lifeline. So yeah, that's what I got.
Actually, Laura and I were talking about it earlier, but I got into politics because of the absolute way that Stephen Harper destroyed our environmental laws in Canada, and I knew that I wanted to get involved in this so I could help strengthen them. And beyond making sure that we're protecting our natural environment here, it's making sure that Canada is going to do its part to fight the climate crisis. Through policies that have been introduced over the last 9 years, our emissions have gone down to the lowest point that they've been since 1996. And it might not be the top of mind issue for a lot of people, but it is affecting us on a day-to-day basis. Jager mentioned earlier the cost of insurance is skyrocketing in places because of wildfire risk. It's a major concern in Squamish here because of floods that are driven by extreme weather events. So it directly affects the affordability crisis, and fighting climate change is actually a solution to it. One of the things we've been working on is providing incentives for homeowners to do home retrofits, so save them on their heating costs. Things like adopting heat pumps. It's incentives for EVs, which will save drivers about $3,000 a year in getting around. And it's also, when we're talking about how we need to grow our economy and make it more productive, the fastest growing area of the economy right now in Canada has been in the clean tech space. We brought in tax incentives to crowd in investment, and we've got major opportunities here in Squamish with some of the really innovative companies. So this very much needs to be top of mind, even if it's not the top issue that people are focused on.
Jager, I'll give this one to you.
I think the worst thing we can possibly do to address the climate crisis is shove our head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. That's not going to fix anything, and that's what the Conservatives and People's Party plan to do. They don't want to address it because it's not convenient for them. The first thing I think the government should step in and do is help pay for more solar panels on houses. When I was in Europe, pretty much every house had a solar panel on it. There was windmills everywhere, and it provides good, clean energy for people, and it also addresses the affordability crisis because you're able to save money on energy, and then if you make more power than you're using in your house, you can sell it back and make more money. We have so many opportunities to make our economy stronger by having a green transition. It's not a detriment to switch off fossil fuels, because that just fossil fuels, all it really does is create big companies that gouge you out in other ways. We need to stop fossil fuel subsidies. We need to make big corporations pay for their emissions. We need emissions caps. And we need to use the taxation we get from taxing these big corporations and use it to invest in a clean future for young people, for everyone, because for years we have thought of climate change as a future issue. Well, it's the next generation's problem. It's here, it's now. The planet is burning, we are flooding. Just 2 years ago, we had a state of provincial emergency because Sechelt ran out of water. We can't keep going on pretending that it's not happening, because it is.
Okay. Peyman, do you want a quick response there?
Yes, Mr. Weiler, if there's a climate emergency, why did the leader of your party, Mark Carney, remove the carbon tax?
So the federal backstop consumer carbon pricing system was removed because this was something that I think is very good policy, but it's something that had become very divisive in the country. It had become synonymous with unaffordability and the amount of misinformation that the Conservatives had put out for year after year after year. It was being blamed for all the affordability challenges that people have, for the price of food going up, even though all statistics show that it's only increased the price of food since 2019 by 0.3%. So it become very divisive. In the commitment was made is the amount of emissions that it would reduce. That is going to be made up by increasing the price of pollution that big emitters pay. Big emitters have more options at their disposal to reduce their emissions. They can invest in different areas. There's a credit market, and one of the things that will be added to that is the big polluters paying for the incentives for Canadians to adopt greener practices. So when this decision was made, it's actually not going to reduce the amount of carbon emissions not going to reduce our ambition in fighting climate change, but it will be made up with other measures, and now that's been brought into place as of a few weeks ago.
I think we're going to move on from this question. Some passion on this one, though. I like it. I see a number of questions coming in here about the Israel-Palestine conflict. So I'm going to give each candidate an opportunity to respond to this one. How will you ensure that Canada takes a principled stance on the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine, prioritizing human rights and international law in its foreign policy? Patrick Weiler, why don't you take this one first?
So I'd say this was probably one of the most challenging issues that I've come across, because it's deeply personal to people. Whether you're sympathize with people in Israel, sympathize with Gaza and the incredible destruction that's happened there. I think Canada has a proud history of being a country that brings parties together, a country that helped draft international law, and a country that's helped uphold international law around the world. And I think, quite frankly, there is more that Canada needs to do in this crisis. Canada has been the largest per capita donor of humanitarian aid in Palestine, which is something I think we can be very proud of, with the immense suffering that's been happening there. But we need to take a more principled stance on this conflict, and to make sure that we are, while Israel is going to be a close partner, but good friends need to speak out when other friends are making some grave mistakes. And with the way that this conflict has been carried out, I think Canada needs to take a more active role. I think we need a two-way arms embargo. And I think in order to achieve Canada's foreign policy position of a two-state solution, Canada needs to unilaterally recognize the state of Palestine.
I'm going to move just straight down the table this time. So Jager, Rosenberg, you're up.
We need to stop sending arms to Israel when the ICC has shown and proven that they are committing war crimes in Gaza. It's frankly inconceivable to me that the Canadian government, Canada as a country, has stood so strongly on the side of human rights for pretty much our entire history. Yet we are continuing to fund a government that is known to be committing genocide against people who have been oppressed for the last 80 years. And I also think it's important to take a step back and look at what the situation is, and look who's affected. And who's affected is people on both sides. Israelis and Palestinians are both people. And we need to stop the killing. We need a ceasefire so that both sides can live free and safely, without being worried about bombs being dropped on their head, without being worried about being discriminated against, We really need to stand firm on the side of human rights, and we need to stand firm against Donald Trump, who wants to turn Gaza into a hotel resort. That's ridiculous. The Gaza and Palestine is for the Palestinian people, and it should remain that way.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, to me, there's such a tremendous hypocrisy while we're standing in our own nation speaking about reconciliation to the genocidal attempts against Indigenous people and simultaneously turning a blind eye to it happening again overseas. I don't think there's been enough bold, outspoken action about this. I think we're still supplying arms to Israel. I think that women and children and innocent people are being killed. And I think that we really need to learn from the entire conversation of truth and reconciliation and say that violence is not the answer anywhere. Violence begets violence. It is the last refuge of the inept. So we need to start having, we need to put our big boy pants on and have conversations instead of trying to kill each other. It's just, it's an atrocity and it's a massive waste, and it's a little bit of a disgrace when you see that your leaders of your country cowering in fear instead of taking a bold stand for something that is so obviously morally wrong.
We're an anti-war party outside of self-defense. I don't like the posture that we're taking, where we're trying to enter into the the defense industry. We're assuming a warmongering footing, and I don't like that. I don't think we should be sending any arms to Israel. Outside of war, I don't think we should be arming anybody that's in a state of conflict. My personal opinion, Israel has gone far off the rails. They've drifted so far to the right. I don't know what's going to happen in that region. It's going to be severely destabilized. I do not want Canada to get dragged into another debacle where we're spending billions of dollars out of the country when I keep going back to the housing crisis for the youth. That's going to be the biggest issue moving forward in the next few decades. These kids are going to be the future generation. They don't have housing. How are we going to tell them in 20, 30 years, oh, sorry, you don't have any housing, but we had no money? Well, what about the $20, $30 billion you're sending overseas? So I'm totally opposed to helping the situation in Israel and Gaza. If you want my personal opinion, you can come ask me later. Thank you.
Okay. Our next question: all sectors of BC's economy rely on the movement of people. An accessible, affordable, sustainable, reliable transportation system is essential to connect communities across the province. How will your party help ensure BC has reliable bus connectivity in rural and tourism-dependent communities? Is there anyone that feels strongly they would like to take a crack at that one?
Could you repeat the question?
I definitely, okay. All sectors of BC's economy rely on the movement of people. A reliable transportation system is essential to connect communities across the province. How will your party ensure BC has reliable bus connectivity in rural and tourism-dependent communities?
This has been a major focus since 2015 of the Liberal Party and Liberal government. We've actually increased the investments in public transit by 10 times from what the Conservative Party was investing in it before. And this has led to some major expansions, mainly in some big urban areas, but increasingly now in some rural areas. Actually, when Greyhound shut down operations in 2018, the federal government made the offer to provinces: if you would match funding, we would provide 50% of the funding to continue bus service. BC took the federal government off on that for Bus North, which is now operating, unfortunately not in the Sea to Sky region. We need regional transit here as well. That's something I've been working with the municipalities here. There was a proposal and a funding system put into place, and I just want to tip my hat to our MLA, Jeremy Valeriot, for brokering an agreement with the government to bring that in by the end of this year. That's going to be transformational for this region because it is so integrated, because it is also, a tourism-dependent community, and people need to be able to get where they're working, as well as for tourists to be able to visit that. So as this goes forward, the federal government doesn't fund operations of transit, but we can provide targeted funding for the expansion of transit for capital. We provide funding for the maintenance of existing lines, and we have targeted funding through the Rural Transit Solutions Fund that's tailor-made for this kind of a solution.
Okay. I'm going to give one rebuttal to this one, and I'm going to send it to Lauren.
Yeah, well, basically I was going to say, unfortunately in governance you hear all the time about your jurisdiction. And technically most of public transportation it falls under the provincial arm. And they have been promising it for 10 years now and just not coming forward with it. It is something that is, again, being downloaded to municipalities who are trying to foot the bill on that. But I do think that it's like one of these funny things. It's a provincial jurisdiction until it's federal. But so there is room to invest more in that piece. And it's interesting, when Deanna Lewis was running for mayor, she would advocate for transit as an issue for murdered and missing Indigenous women. And that's a really critical piece that doesn't get talked about a lot either. So it is a reconciliation and access and affordability piece. We absolutely need more public transportation, and we absolutely need to facilitate and invest in that. Thanks.
Thank you. We do have around 60 questions, so I am going to move on to the next one. Childcare in Squamish is in crisis. Waitlists are years long, fees are unaffordable, and childcare workers are underpaid and burning out. Childcare should be a public good, not a private luxury. What is your party's concrete plan to improve access and affordability in the childcare sector? Is there anyone that would like to take that one? Peyman, let's go to you.
From talking to my constituents, they would rather have, instead of giving their tax dollars to the government and the government providing subsidies for childcare, they would rather if it was a tax credit. That way they can, the dollars can follow wherever they want to go in whatever daycare. So that's what our party would do.
But you can report childcare and get tax back for it.
That's the feedback I got from my constituents.
Okay. Well, I truly do enjoy going on about systemic misogyny on a regular basis. And part of it is absolutely, this is something I experience too, and it's a huge problem, especially in places like Squamish, where I think there's one childcare space for every 5 people. Like, you want to talk about a gender wage gap. Women cannot work in that environment. Our entire system is actually set up so that it's very difficult for women to go back to work. Absolutely, we need to subsidize childcare, because that's exactly the rub. Not only is daycare unaffordable for women on the salaries that they bring in, but the pay that the women it's predominantly women who are doing the early childcare education, and the costs of their education to get there make the entire structure cost prohibitive. So unfortunately at this point, it is not an economic model without a significant amount of investment. And provinces like Quebec, who were the original $10 a day providers, have really shown that that investment pays off. I don't know how much it pays off, but it pays off significantly. And it is a key component to women's mental and emotional health, because like I was about to talk about, in Squamish, many people are not from here, or their family have moved away. And as I mentioned earlier, with the affordability crisis, we're losing our community rapidly. So we have very few supports. And to not have that, and to have underfunded amenities to boot, is incredibly difficult.
So I mentioned it earlier, but for the first time in Canada's history in 2021, the federal government took an active role in supporting childcare across the country. We signed agreements with every single province and territory to bring in $10 a day childcare over a staged process. And as part of that in BC, there's supposed to be 35,000 spaces that are built. Already, childcare fees have been cut in half for regulated spaces. But the reality is while there's been 600 built in our riding, we need so so many more in Squamish for the reasons that Lauren just mentioned. But we need the province to allocate those spaces here. That is really the critical part, because $10 a day or affordable childcare doesn't matter if you can't get access to it. So I really think the province needs to carry their end of the bargain. They're not even close to the way of getting there, but the federal government is going to continue to support it. But this is something that the Conservatives have promised to get rid of. They called the childcare funding like a slush fund. They don't believe in it. To the economic point of view, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, after Mark Carney, said there was two things that we could do to grow our economy more than anything else. Number one was investing in affordable childcare across the country that can allow both parents to stay in the workforce. The other one is tackling interprovincial trade barriers. We're focused on doing both of those things, and that's one way we can get our house in order.
I agree with Lauren that one of the biggest obstacles is that our system is inherently misogynistic, and I find it telling that Mark Carney, one of the first things he did as Prime Minister was get rid of the Ministry of Women and Gender Equity. I don't think that that's something that should happen in 2025. We should be making progress, not going backwards. His cabinet is the first in 10 years to not have gender equity, not have as many men as women. Or women as men, words. I will give Justin Trudeau credit. At least he consistently did that. But Mark Carney's thrown that away. The Liberals, I will say, the $10 a day childcare is a great policy. It's really making a difference in people's lives. But we need to keep rolling it out, and we need to protect it, because the government is looking to make cuts. The Conservatives, if they get in, they have said they will cut $10 a day childcare. And if the Liberals get in again with the majority, they're talking about reducing the deficit, and that always means cutting services. And that's probably going to be the first one on their chopping block. It's new, and they think they can get away with it. We need a government that's held to account with a strong NDP that will force them to keep these policies and expand them and continue putting more investment so people are safe, and we can get young children educated early on. We can get them started early on so that they move into school and keep learning throughout their entire lives.
Patrick Weiler, would you like a response to that one?
Yeah, so first thing, committed, we're going to keep all the services that we brought in. We're also going to keep all the transfers we're making to provinces so that they can deliver the services as well. And I would hope, rather than wild speculation, we'll just stick to the facts while we're here. And I'll just say one other thing about the cabinet shuffle. It's a slimmed down cabinet. It's many fewer ministers for essentially a caretaker cabinet until we get through this next election. If re-elected, you're going to see an expansion of cabinet. It might not be gender balanced right now, but of the 23 ministers, 11 are women. So, that's about as close as you can get, and I think it'll look very different. Though there's no ministry that was cut or slashed, it was just built into another ministry, or another minister. So those responsibilities are there. They're parts of our commitments to Canadians that haven't changed, but it's a slimmed down cabinet for a very short time during an election period where it's essentially caretaker.
Okay. I'm going to take us to our next question here. Actually, I see one first. Where is the Conservative candidate Keith Roy? He declined the invitation to participate. Squamish is projected to potentially grow by another 25,000 people in the next 10 years. What are the priorities to ensure that this region grows in a sustainable, community-focused way? What would you specifically do? Is there anybody that would like to weigh in on this one first?
Sorry, could you repeat it?
The question?
Yeah.
Squamish is projected to grow by another 25,000 people in the next 10 years. What are the priorities to ensure that this region grows in a sustainable, community-focused way? What would you specifically do? Lauren, would you like to take that one?
Oh, well, I'll talk about it. That number is higher than what I've seen over a 10-year projection. Some of the stuff that I rail on in council, is we need infrastructure. We need infrastructure very badly. We need increases in amenities. We need funding towards those amenities. We need, Ms. Ellis has been doing beautiful work on rental affordable housing. We need way more for her to do. We need way more projects on affordable rentals. We need way more. We also need affordable ownership models. If we're going to expand to that level, we need regional transportation. We need that very badly. We need highway upgrades. We need a lot of infrastructural updates if we're going to see that, and just more supports. We're going to need more schools too, and support for businesses, because we need to have a resilient local economy in order to house these people. Right now, I mean, people always say this is a bedroom community and everybody's commuting to Vancouver for work, but that's not entirely accurate. But we do need to provide more jobs that can essentially afford lives in this community. So investing in industry land, investing in just different prospective, stable, sustainable jobs in our community.
Thank you. Jager, and then I think we're going to move on to the next question.
Well, as Lauren mentioned, there's a whole bunch of infrastructure we need to build up. We need more transportation, we need more housing, and we need more health services. You know, that's something we've really been lacking recently throughout our entire community. We need people to be able to access the care they need. And one of the unfortunate side effects that often happens when communities grow is people get pushed out, and it's often seniors on a fixed income or pension that get pushed out of the community. And we need to have safeguards. So seniors who have lived here, 20, 30 years, or their whole lives, who have contributed to our community, are able to stay where they love, where they want to live around their family. We need to have more funding so people can age in place. And if they need care, we need to have more funding for at-home care and more long-term care, where it's not for profit. It's meant to protect people instead of making a business money. We need really to keep the community for the people already here while inviting new people in.
Thank you. I just want to remind you that we are going through the Slido questions not in the order they're received, but on the amount of upvotes they receive. So if you would like to participate in determining what questions get asked, you can do so using that link there. Wood fiber LNG is now part of our community, regardless of public sentiment. Local government failed to represent our interests, letting the company operate on its own terms. As our representative, how would you ensure Wood Fiber LNG pays its fair share and complies with environmental standards, including site cleanup? And I'm going to give this one first to Patrick Weiler. I'll give you a rebuttal, I promise.
Wood fiber was permitted back in 2015, and there are conditions that are binding on that company and that project for what they need to be, they need to meet. And there's an ongoing role for the federal government to ensure that those conditions are being met. I would say with this project itself, the Harper government decided to substitute the provincial environmental assessment at the time for the federal assessment. And actually, at the time when it was being assessed, I was doing work for the Squamish Nation, and they had no trust at all in the rigor and robustness of the provincial environmental assessment system, so they actually created their own. And now the Squamish Nation is also a regulator for this project, and they have binding conditions that the company needs to meet. And so, my role, if I'm reelected, is to continue to hold the company accountable to meeting those conditions. And if they're not, there are remedies that are there to ensure that they're held to account for that.
Thank you. Lauren Greenlaw, did you want the rebuttal there?
Well, yeah, I have a couple things to say. I always do. First of all, our community was never given consent, an opportunity to give consent on that project. Second of all, we have been busting our little buns to get those pieces and to hold them to account and to get financial benefits from this project, and we have basically no way to get it. It's never been offered to us. I'm not going to go too far into that. But moral of the story is the local government piece has almost zero power in this entire conversation. And that right there, to me, is one of the reasons why I'm sitting in this chair. It is absurd, the level of subsidization that this project is receiving from you, from us. It's absurd. It's bad for the environment. LNG is now being shown to have a carbon footprint that is 33% worse than coal. The entire conversation of this being a bridge fuel is false, and I will tell you that as a geologist. And also, the practice of fracking is, in my opinion, as somebody who comes from the resource industry, one of the most, if not the most, damaging extractive processes that we have on Earth. It permanently and irreversibly contaminates groundwater, which means it contaminates all the plants and it contaminates all the animals that eat it, including us. So I got on a real tangent there, but we are working hard to see financial benefits of this project in your community as a local government.
Our next question. How does your party plan to take action to advance the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence and work towards its vision for Canada? Where does your party stand on the need for a dedicated minister to lead this work at the national level? Do we have? Lauren, go ahead.
Hi, I'd like to talk to you about systemic misogyny. Yeah, so I mean, there are so many ways in which our society is violent towards women, and they are not all overt. Obviously, we have wonderful facilities in Squamish, like Pearl Space, who provide they provide a lot of services to women who are in really bad places. We need to, first of all, we need to educate men predominantly. Over 50% of women experience sexual assault in their lifetime. I find it very difficult to believe that the number is actually that low. And women are most likely, if they are murdered, they are most likely to be murdered by their intimate partner. So there are some real behavioral pieces that need to be addressed. And that work needs to be done individually, really. But we need to finance all these pieces. It is important that we have these gender equity ministers and these gender equity cabinets, because it does matter that this representation is seen. It does matter that we see that we're on the dockets. Right now, we hear adoption over abortion, and I'm thinking Handmaid's Tale, you know? We're looking south of the border, and women are dying because they've had their reproductive rights removed from them. So I wish that I was wearing a tinfoil hat right now, but actually I'm scared for the rights of me and my children.
I have seen the Liberals and the NDP weigh in on this one, so I'm going to ask Peyman Askari, does your party have a position on this?
I'm not going to speak for the party, but I'll speak for myself. Everything I know about treating people with respect, I learned from my parents. I'm completely on the opposite spectrum from my three fellow panelists here. I don't think the government should be telling me how to be a good person. That's a responsibility of the parents. If there's a man out there that's harming a woman, that's why we have a criminal code. That's why we have a sense of honor and duty, and this is why we were trained as children to respect people. I'm very alarmed, and I understand my arguments might not be resonating with you today, but we have $1.2 trillion in debt. 80% of our debt is accrued interest. We couldn't pay off the previous debt, so we got a loan to pay off that debt. And I reject this notion that Canadians are bad people. I wasn't born here. I'm an immigrant, and I love this country. All Canadians are good. All men have mothers. They love their mothers. I'm sorry, I will not partake in this divisiveness. I love this country. Thank you.
Lauren, would you like a rebuttal?
Well, I just wanted to say that there's a lovely lady up here in front in the white dress, and she's actually very well informed about how gender violence impacts people, so she might be a good person for you to speak to. But some of the problems with like the conversation about having debt in our country, if women did not experience so much systemic misogyny like we were talking about with the childcare piece, that would actually be fantastic for our economy. So though these pieces don't seem like they are intrinsic to moving economy forward, they absolutely fundamentally are. Like I was saying earlier, our wealth disparity that we are feeling internationally is predicated upon inequity. And that's like when you look at all the bodies that are talking about how do we transcend this entire mess that we're in, these overlapping crises, the first thing that these international bodies are saying, addressing sexism, educating girls and women, getting them into the workforce, these are all key components. So I get that like superficially it may not look like this is a huge part of it, and I'm not saying like it's like racism. Misogyny is just something we've been so permeated in that it's not often intentional. It's unconscious, but it is something that we need to unlearn, and that is part of the conversation. So, and it's for all of us. Like women are also sexist a lot of the time. It's a real mind trip when you start digging into it, but it is crucially important that we find equity.
You know, as a man, I don't think it's really my place to be leading this conversation. I think it's more my place to sit back and listen to what the women who have experienced these things have to say. But one issue that I do think is really important on this front is healthcare and the huge disparity between male and female outcomes in healthcare. You know, in the science world, in studies, there's often this mentality that male biology is the base and women, you know, is somehow different. So they don't even bother doing drug studies with women a lot of the time. And we need to put a stop to that because it's outdated and it's ridiculous. And, you know, I'm really concerned in my generation about how men my age have been thinking about women because of the online echo chamber. Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, it's frankly disgusting the things people my age think about women. You know, it's 2025, wake up people. And we see Pierre Poilievre cozying up to Jordan Peterson, doing his interview with him. You know, it's concerning. You know, abortion is healthcare. You know, we can't go taking away women's rights and doing what America has done. We've seen how horrible of an impact that's had for everyone, but especially women. And we really need to stand firm. We support women, we protect women, and we want to hear their voices loud and clear.
I'm going to acknowledge a question here. What is your opinion on a nominee missing all of the debates? How does that affect the vote? Do you think Keith Roy should be disqualified from the election due to his neglect and absence in this platform? Instead of posing that one to candidates, I'm going to say that is a question that you each get to answer at the polls. So, next question. One of Canadians' top priorities for the federal government is investing in healthcare. What would you do to prioritize greater investments in healthcare, including access, it's switching on me while we go, to family health services, mental health services, and reducing backlogs for surgeries and diagnostics?
Could you repeat the question?
Okay. Top priority is healthcare. What would you do to prioritize greater investments in healthcare? Peyman, let's go ahead.
Did you want to go first?
Oh, you can go.
The biggest challenge that the constituents in my riding are having is the wait times for healthcare. I've talked to several of the voters, and they have to go to the US, they have to pay out of pocket, they have to take time out of their work to do that, and their dollars are being spent in the US instead of being spent here. One way you could alleviate that immediately would be to have a two-tier system. However, barring that, I would deal with the health cartel. I find that's the biggest issue. With the College of Physicians, they're creating so much bureaucracy. For example, UBC sets the number of doctors that are necessary. In my opinion, if UBC sets the number of doctors per year that are licensed, and the next year there's a shortage of doctors, that falls specifically on UBC. This is one of the only industries where we do this. We don't do this with anything else. We don't do this with the auto industry. We don't do this with the restaurant industry. To my knowledge, we don't do it with dentists either. But I want to free up the healthcare system, remove some of the bureaucracy, streamline it, and that would be our party's plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Patrick Weiler, then Lauren, and then Jager.
So the federal government made a major investment in providing additional health transfers to the provinces and territories in 2023. Federal government doesn't control how that money is spent. It's exclusive jurisdiction of the provinces, but what we've seen is healthcare hasn't met the expectations that we have as British Columbians and across Canada. And this is something that I think is one of the strong differentiators of us and the Americans. You know, we have a public healthcare system. We don't have 325,000 people each year that are going bankrupt because of their medical bills. With this new funding that's been brought in, the provinces are now having to provide, they're being accountable from the point of view of providing reporting on a number of things, one of which is what Peyman mentioned earlier, is how they are going to speed up foreign credential recognition in between for people that come to Canada from another country but aren't able to practice yet. So the federal government's providing funding for the provinces to speed up those programs. It's already having an impact. We've seen 6 times more nurses be credentialed to practice here. That needs to speed up considerably. But the other thing is, as we're bringing down these interprovincial trade barriers, one of the 3 focuses is on labor mobility. So if you're able to practice in one province, you should be able to practice in all provinces. And that's really important for healthcare. And I would just say on mental health care, there's a great facility the federal government's funded in Squamish called the Foundry, and we need more of those across the country.
Was my turn? Oh, sorry, I thought it was Jager. I wanted to go back to, sorry, I forgot to mention we were talking about Squamish growth. Hospital. We need a much bigger hospital to serve this region. I think there are a few things that we need to do in order to kind of right our entire healthcare system. I think we need to do more grants for doctors and nurses to have loan forgiveness when they go into community. Right now, there are programs that exist for remote communities, but frankly, this problem is happening all over the country. My sister lives in Ottawa. They have 20-hour wait times at their hospitals. My family has gone to 4 GPs since being in Squamish, and we've only been here for like 7 years. So these are pieces that we need to rectify. We absolutely need more doctors, absolutely, and more nurses, and perhaps an expansion of nurses, nursing practices so that they can be more of a primary care provider. Of course, this is not free, and how are we going to do it? Say it with me now. Defund fossil fuels. Last year, the federal government spent $30 billion in subsidies and whatever, gave that amount of money to fossil fuels. And yes, sometimes they aren't subsidies, sometimes they're tax breaks, and sometimes they're other things. It's incredibly difficult to calculate how these subsidies are being received. So subsidies is a bit of a catch-all. But we absolutely need more investment in doctors and healthcare, and also switching to more preventative care as opposed to being curative.
Well, my mind goes back to how did we get in this situation in the first place? And the reason why our healthcare is so strained is because of years and decades of healthcare cuts by the BC Liberal government under Christy Clark and Gordon Campbell. It's the classic conservative playbook. You underfund a service that people rely on so that it doesn't work anymore, and then you go, oh, we need to privatize it. That's the only way to make it work. We're seeing it happen in Ontario, and we need to stand firm against it. We need to call it out where we see it. Here in BC, we don't have enough doctors. It's pure and simple. So we need to make it easier for people moving here to start practicing right away. They don't have to go through a bunch of red tape. We need to make it easier for people who are training to go into the medical field. My sister, she's training to be a psych nurse right now, and there's so many unnecessary obstacles to get your degree. Like, why do you need to do a whole bunch of math courses to be a nurse? It's kind of, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't reduce quality. And really, we've been expanding healthcare on so many fronts. We've gotten pharmacare passed, we've gotten dental care passed, and that's really life-saving because it prevents things from getting more severe. If you're able to get your teeth checked and cared for before you get a massive tooth infection or whatever, where you need surgery, it's saving money, it's protecting people's lives, and we need to continue expanding services, expanding mental health so people don't get addicted to drugs and need the medical care then. They don't have other issues. Yeah.
This buzzer makes my job a lot easier, not having to be the bad guy. All right, next question. Pierre Poilievre is campaigning to defund the CBC. What is your stance on our public broadcaster and Canadian media in general? Jager, and then over to the People's Party.
Well, I'd say it's very, am I starting yet?
Yes,
okay.
Go ahead.
I'd say it's very telling that in English he says he'll defund the CBC, and then when he's speaking in French, he's like, no, I'll keep Radio-Canada, because Radio-Canada is very popular. He doesn't really care about the principle of it all. He's just trying to stir up his base that thinks CBC is, left-wing propaganda or whatever. I think we need to keep CBC, we need to keep it funded. It provides good services, it provides good local coverage. And I mean, it's really politically motivated why he wants to defund it, and he's really hypocritical on the issue. So I just don't even take any note of what he has to say on it.
Okay. Peyman?
You have to be very careful when you're giving the state the power to also control the medium for news. Pierre Poilievre, I still believe that he's going to get in with the majority government, the minority majority. If he gets in, I don't think he's going to dismantle the CBC. It's too much power. The ability to control the message. My guess is that he's going to transfer the funds to the new right-wing news outlet, Juno News. I think the information should be in the private hands. If you want to have something like CBC to work in the interests of the people, you need more safeguards. The government in power cannot be able to control the message, and personally, I think it's election interference at this point. Thank you.
Patrick, I saw the grimace there. Would you like a rebuttal or a response?
Yeah, so, I think this is, I find it kind of wild that this is one of the most, the rallying cries of the Conservative Party right now, that they want to defund the CBC at a time when, our sovereignty and our identities being threatened by the United States. I think we need to protect our cultural institutions now more than ever. While the Conservatives are going to propose to defund and slash the CBC, we've just put forward a plan on how we're going to strengthen the CBC. Actually, per capita, we provide about half the amount of funding for a public broadcaster that countries like the UK do. And it's so important to provide local news at a time where we're losing a lot of our local coverage. I mean, we're fortunate that we have great coverage here with Mountain FM and the Squamish Chief, but so many communities are losing that, and CBC is the only coverage that they have. We need to preserve local news. We need to make sure that we have an unbiased news source like that, so that people can trust the information that they're hearing at a time right now where we need to have a strong media to hold government accountable, to ensure that people are getting accurate information in a world of disinformation. It's the absolute last thing that we should do to defund it. So we propose to provide an additional $150 million, and there's actually some Squamish reporting that's just in the process of being set up. So we'll have local news coverage here from CBC.
So you often hear that there are three pillars to democracy, and those are journalism, science, and the legal system. And we already know that science is under attack. We're having people question the validity of climate change when the science has been absolutely clear for literally 30 years now. I've looked at the isotopic data. It's happening. It's here. And that journalism piece is a key part. You start hearing, you heard Jager mention earlier Andrew Tate. People are being sucked into these weird echo chambers where really toxic stuff is happening, and it is really important to have good news sources. I don't disagree with some of Peyman's comments about tying, basically the Liberals giving a lot of money to the CBC could make them pretty Liberal friendly moving forward, but if it's like enshrined in legislation and it is there for good, I think it's really important. You know, media directly influences culture. And so if we have a media that is toxic in any way, like could you imagine if CBC was Fox News, you know? And I do think there is some bias in CBC, but I think it leans right. So that's my opinion. But I do think it's important that we keep this as a treasure. Also CBC Radio 2, CBC Radio 3, hard yes. Indie music, yes. Thank you.
All right, do we have time for one more question, Anne, before we go into closing statements? All right, highway safety improvements, something that impacts all of us. How will you, as a candidate, prioritize federal funding for highway safety improvements, including barriers and regional transit options to reduce congestion and accidents in our community? Anyone have? Lauren, go ahead.
Okay. One of the really low-hanging fruits that I feel like we could do pretty economically and pretty quickly is just put some reflective tape on, or reflective paint on the Sea to Sky Highway. Like when you're driving the highway at night, it's gross, especially at this time of year. It does not feel safe, and I feel like that's a ludicrously small ask. And again, yes, regional transportation, we need that. All of our municipalities in this riding, we are literally designing our towns waiting for regional transportation. You know, you're feeling this parking crunch downtown, that's because we're waiting for regional transportation so that our houses don't all need to have 2 cars, which they currently do because we don't have enough regional transportation. So yes, absolutely, let's put funding into these pieces, and when we get this regional transportation, we're taking volume off of roads, which is going to reduce the chances of us having collisions. One of the things I've really been tuned into since being on council and paying more attention is you get one of these people also speed control, implementing more speed control. You get these aggressive drivers on the Sea to Sky, you know, you get into an accident, that shuts down all access to our hospital, to our people, going to work, everything for hours. So we need more speed control, we need more enforcement, we need just some sort of reflective paint, something on the road, and transportation. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you. We are winding down for the evening, so we are going to move into candidate closing remarks. And just remind me here, how long does each candidate have? You each have 2 minutes for closing remarks. We're going to go in reverse order from where we started, so we'll move down the table this way sequentially. Patrick Weiler, over to you.
Well, thanks, Megan, and I do want to thank fellow candidates for a very spirited debate here. And while we might disagree on policy, I think we've seen here that we're not disagreeable. And I think this is one of the key functions of democracy here, for us to present our ideas. And I really appreciate everybody here coming out to listen to what we have to say, so that you can hold us accountable when you're making the very important decisions that you need to make. And absolutely, you have a very important decision to make. I would say this is the most consequential election in my lifetime, maybe for many people in this room, because as I mentioned earlier, there's so much instability in the world. And you have very different visions that have been put forward about how we respond to this. You know, how we respond to our sovereignty being put under threat, to the major economic challenges that we're going to face as a country, how we're going to reduce our reliance on the United States at a time where they can't be a trusted partner anymore in trade or security. You know, we've seen what the Conservatives have proposed. Unfortunately, you haven't been able to hear about it tonight, which I think is telling in and of itself. But they have a set of policies that, as Daniel Smith has said, are very much in sync with Donald Trump and the Republican Party. They want to defund the CBC. They want to reduce our connection with the rest of the world. They want to, rather than work together, they want to attack municipalities just the same way they tried to silence scientists and environmentalists before. We propose something very, very different. We want to grow the strongest economy in the G7. We want to protect people. We want to build a kind of future that's going to take advantage of some of the areas the U.S. is vacating right now. That's in clean tech and fighting climate change and the digital revolution that we're facing. So if you re-elect me as your MP, I will stand for those things, and I will stand up for you just the way I have in the last 5.5 years. Thank you.
This election is one of the most important elections in a generation. But it's not a binary choice. You don't have to choose between right-wing authoritarianism and centrist left-wing parties that pretend to be in your interest during an election and then ditch you for the corporate billionaires the second they're back in power. There are other options. Here in BC, we don't really decide who the government will be, unfortunately. But we do decide the type of government. We decide whether it's a minority government or a majority government. And we have seen over the last 5 years that minority governments get things done for you. Pharmacare, dental care, anti-scab legislation, childcare, and so many other initiatives that are helping regular people. But when there are majority governments, it's scandal after scandal. SNC-Lavalin, the We Day scandal, the Senate appointment scandal. The government will not work for you unless you make them. I'm glad that the other candidates showed up today. We were here in Gibson's yesterday, had a good debate then. We're going to be in Roberts Creek tomorrow. And it's very good that I'm quite happy that they've stepped up and they want to serve their community. But when a politician wants your vote but can't even show up to a debate, that says something really important. He doesn't think that he needs to be accountable to you. He thinks that he can just talk and lie at his rallies without any accountability, and I think that's wrong. I will always stand up for this community. I will always do what is right for the people I serve if I have the privilege to be elected, and I will always listen to the people and be happy to be held to account if I do something wrong. Please vote for me. I will stand up for you any way I can. Thank you.
So I do have to say, I hear a lot of people talking, ironically, that they're planning to vote Liberal out of fear of Conservatives, and also Conservatives out of fear of Liberal. And to this conversation, we will get the system that we vote for. So if we would like to trend towards a system where we have two parties, like the States, that's what we can do. That's what we can do here. We can continue going down this path, and there's that definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And what I'm asking you to do is actually consider the person and individual that you're voting for, and consider which ideas you actually align with the most, instead of looking at the overall party. That's how I think politics should work. And the other thing is, neither of those parties will bring systemic change. And all of the problems that we're talking about, they are from systemic change. Any little policy that's not addressing systemic change is like a Band-Aid over the Grand Canyon. It's not going to fix our issues. The biggest issue we are having is living out of balance with our environment. That's the biggest issue we're facing. And unfortunately, the Liberals and the Conservatives have shown their true colors in this, like buying multi-billion-dollar pipelines with our tax dollars, subsidizing LNG projects. And when we talk about emissions, okay, per capita, perhaps they have decreased, but as an overall, they have increased. And if you want to hear something really terrifying, our emissions calculations do not count things like forest fires, in which you have lost both a carbon sink and produce particulate and emissions. So these are really sobering thoughts. This is not a time for little meager adaptations. We need systemic change. And I'll bring that. Thanks.
In this election, the people are operating on a level of anxiety that I have not seen in a very long time. And it's getting to the point where we're losing our critical thinking abilities. There are a lot of problems in Canada. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. there's been just a slew of corrupt activity coming out of the Liberal Party the last few decades. The Conservative Party before that, Harper he was a smaller, but he wasn't much better. I see an erosion of the rule of law. I see a lot of activism in our courts. I find that very alarming. I don't like the way our Senate works. The Western provinces, we have almost no power. The Ontario or Quebec alone can veto anything that we push forward. But I'm also seeing hope. I'm seeing a lot of grassroots movements organizing, trying to make change in their country. Two notable ones from here is BC Rising and Freedom Rising. I'm noticing a lot of people putting aside their happiness and their free time to get involved. Running for office is a perfect example. Getting involved with the local political parties. So, hope is not all lost, but the one thing I implore upon you guys, you individuals here today, don't let anybody divide you. These are dangerous times. We have to move forward with love and unity and hope and respect. So if somebody says that guy's a left-wing extremist or that guy's a right-wing extremist, do not be governed by your emotions. Obviously, I want you to vote for me. Let me go to Ottawa. Let me have reasonable debate. But even if you don't, try to vote for the lesser of 2, 3, 4, 5 evils. Use your critical thinking abilities. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful night.
Well, a lively and spirited debate. Thank you for all of your questions. Join me one more time in thanking the BIA, Tourism Squamish, the Squamish Chamber, and the Squamish Chief. Thank you for bringing us together. We do have the space until 8:30.
I was going to say, people can vote right now if they want.
Yes, Patrick is absolutely right. We do have the space until 8:30, so if you would like to stay and mingle with the candidates for a while, you are welcome to do that. And as Patrick has just raised, advanced polling is open right now, or is it the 18th to the 21st?
No, it's Elections Canada has an
right
office.
There, great.
Right there, open till 9 if you want to vote right now.
There we go. Thank you, Patrick. You're doing this better than I am. Wonderful. Well, that wraps up our evening. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, super convenient. There's an